Thank you, Laura, and thank you to all of you who are going to be spending the next 60 minutes with us at Deque. We really appreciate it. Just for simplicity, for the rest of this presentation, instead of referring to the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, which is a mouthful, we will refer to it as the IDEA Act. So what does it mean and what do you need to do is the subject of this webinar, and we hope to leave you with some information that will be useful to you. So let's boil it down. Well, the requirements say that, the 21st Century IDEA Act, or what we call IDEA Act, is going to be requiring website modernization, digitization of government services and forms, electronic signatures, customer experience and digital services delivery, and standardization, which is quite a mouthful, but what does it really mean? Even after you boil it down to those 5 bullet points, you still are perhaps not clear on whether you are meeting these requirements or indeed what those requirements actually mean. And whether you understand these requirements fully yet, let's be clear on the deadlines and the reporting requirements and what's in scope for the IDEA Act. This year, 180 days after the enactment of the Act on December 20th, 2018, for any new development, that means anything that is being redesigned, newly created, basically, you have to build in the requirements that we went over, the 5 bullets. And of course, we are very focused on accessibility, so we're going to keep dialing it into the Section 508 accessibility world, but you've got to build it in, basically, all the requirements of the IDEA Act. The CIOs have to enable that. So how do you build it in? Whatever that needs to happen, they need to enable that. They need to monitor and improve on that. And then stuff that is not being currently built, either as a web application, digital service, website, you have to really look at it and you have to see how you will digitize it. This includes things like forms, documents, processes, and not just digitize it, but basically not replicate what you have today, but look at it carefully and reimagine how you can make it more efficient and effective. So this reporting, the internal reporting and the CIO monitoring had to begin a couple of months ago. And so this requires that you go and identify what is not digitized today, estimate what will it take to digitize it, and basically stop the bleeding. That's for anything that is new in flight. But what about all the hundreds of thousands of millions of pages that you have and applications that you have in production today? Fast forward to December, which is not too far away, a few months from now, you have to report to Congress on basically what you have. What are you going to do to reduce that? Meaning, if there's duplication, how are you going to deduplicate the content? You're going to have to tell them what the estimate is in terms of cost, in terms of schedule, to bring existing stuff into conformance with the IDEA Act. Again, back to those requirements we talked about. You're going to also have to report annually to the public, including a detailed report on where you stand with respect to the IDEA Act requirements. Again, the CIO oversight will be required here as well to make sure you are creating a baseline, you're prioritizing, and you're reporting on things, you're fixing things, and reporting again on the improved things. You're going to continue to do that for 4 years after the first report. So this reporting requirement is not going to go away. It's going to stay with us. You're going to also then turn your eyes to, or turn your attention. This is going to be probably a bigger effort than the new things being developed and existing public-facing content combined. When you think of your internal websites, your internal digital services and applications, your training, your e-learning courses, all of that content will have to be digitized, modernized, meaning meet the requirements of the IDEA Act, and you will have to report on that as well. I think there is a little bit of more of a runway to do that. Not much more, but a little bit more. And I think the effort is substantially greater when you think about all the infrastructure you have internally that you will have to make meet the IDEA Act requirements. But what does this really mean? I went over the requirements and I said, well, we don't really know what it means. So let's look at it from a different perspective. Once upon a time, let's say just last month, July of 2019, you have Citizen Chain coming in. Citizen Chain is somebody who gets paid, say, $30,000 a year. And it's not really, she looks and does a salary survey on many job sites and talks to some fellow employees and figures out basically that she's not being paid fairly. So she wants to go to the Department of Labor's website and file a complaint. Today, when she would do that, she would be given an option to really go to a physical location where you can actually be directed to the nearest office for assistance. So she has to go in there. Or, much easier, she can actually make a phone call with a 1-800 number that does provide services for the hearing impaired. But in both cases, whether she's directed to a local office or the phone call, she is going to basically have to file a complaint by downloading a PDF and filling out the form. And basically, this is the experience that the IDEA Act is meant to transform. So, and it's all about the customer experience and customer journey. In this case, the customer journey is inconvenient, and Citizen Chain is left, not feeling too happy, right? I mean, it's a lot of work to fill it out and scan it in, or whatever you have to do, make it readable, verify it, and mail it in. So let's fast forward to post-IDEA Act, say 2020. What is this supposed to look like? What it's supposed to look like is that you will have a modern website, and we'll define what that is very shortly because that has a lot of elements to it. You're supposed to have a standardized experience. Everything that you do is supposed to be digitized services and forms, including if you need electronic signatures, you should be able to do that right there and then. And it basically leads to a seamless delivery and journey for the customer, and they love it. So this is what it's about, the IDEA Act, in a nutshell. Now, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive on what it means to have a modern website, because there are many requirements tucked into that. First requirement is that a modern website is supposed to be a website that is accessible to people with disabilities, meaning Section 508 compliant. So no matter how much attention everybody pays to this, things creep in, things get overlooked. In this web page, for example, I ran our open source Axe Core browser extension and found out that there is some markup behind the page on things that are hidden. So they no longer exist visually on the page, but a screen reader user would be able to get to that list that has an ARIA markup meant to be telling them what the role of that list is. But really, it should never be showing up. How confusing would that be? It would be a little confusing, but this is not an issue that was just pure neglect. It was maintenance. So, but with the IDEA Act, a modern website has to be accessible to people with disabilities. A modern website has to have a consistent appearance. That means that the search, the menu, the header, the footer, whether you're on the home page or on any one of the hundreds of thousands of pages tucked away underneath that, they all have to have the same consistent navigation appearance. So you know you're on the same Department of Labor website, for example. Consistency actually is, as the Section 508 refresh starts to address the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, which take into consideration the cognitive disabilities will require this as well. So it could conceivably be really a part of the Section 508 compliance if you are being forward-looking. The third requirement of a modern website is that there should be a regular diet. We all love diets, don't we? But no overlap of functionality, dedupe, dedupe, dedupe. Because for a customer, how are they supposed to know which version is the right version? Which one are they supposed to interact with? And which is the latest and the greatest? And sometimes duplicating content is not helpful. So don't duplicate content. It's hard to maintain too. Have a search that works. So great, you have a search box on every single page of your website. It is clearly visible. It is in the same location. But if the results don't really surface data that is relevant, it would be a problem. In this case, Citizen Jane searches for unfair wage and gets how to file a complaint, which is pretty relevant. So great results there, but a search that works. Another element of a modern website, according to the IDEA Act, is that you should know if you are interacting in a safe and secure way with the government entity that you're interacting with. There's a official website of the United States government statement up on the Department of Labor site, and it tells you here's how you know it's a standard United States government website. Look at the domain and other things. It must end in .gov, .mil, so it's a government website. The site is secure because it's using encryption methodologies, which are the latest and the greatest. It's using the HTTPS. So a standard secure connection is another element of the IDEA Act as it considers modern websites. Continuous testing and using the data to improve is a critical element as well. What that means is something that Deque has been preaching forever. Shift left, shift left, shift left. Accessibility is what we used to say, which means that for every new code, you're going to consider these requirements upfront throughout the process, as you build, as you deploy, as you put in production. And when you're measuring throughout this process and testing throughout this process, you're going to be able to identify improvements in each step. Provide, a modern website will provide, according to the IDEA Act, an efficient and accurate experience based on a customized, personalized experience. That does not mean separate. It just simply means personalized. So don't think you can create a separate website. We got rid of that misnomer 20 years ago, I think. But 1 out of every 5 people in the US is a person with a disability. That does not include people who are temporarily disabled or people with ambient disabilities or the aging population. So really, you're talking about a customer journey that impacts a lot of people. And whatever you can do to make it efficient. That means that think about the number of steps to complete a transaction, a customer journey for all different personas, not just for somebody who is, a 20-year-old. So consider the entire experience and have personas that address the different kinds of people that you're looking to address or serve. Personalize, meaning, use data like what was their last journey like, what did they want, what location are they coming from, etc., etc. Lastly, but not least, it's got to be mobile friendly. Not mobile first, but the IDEA Act, according to the modernization definition, says that they must be mobile friendly. It must work on different devices because people consume information in different ways now. And once again, a plug for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1. This requirement too is addressed in Work Act 2.1. The mobile accessibility requirements are being addressed more and more. And as most people will tell you, an accessible experience actually makes you think hard about the experience in general, and it improves it for everybody. So those are the elements of the modernization of a website. But I'm going to really keep trying to make it real what it means. The IDEA Act, all the different elements of the IDEA Act are really designed. You must have heard of the buzzword digital transformation. The commercial world has been trying to do this for the last several years, and there are different stages of transformation, really. But basically, this digital transformation at speed is what the IDEA Act is all about. It says that the interactions of the experience of citizen Jane as she looks to interact with the government must be a digitized government. It must be a digital experience. It must be a seamless delivery of services. And, the expectation of citizen Jane as she interacts with the rest of the world is that this journey, this interaction with the government will be painless. Now, the customer journey is how citizen Jane interacts with the government. So what we're going to do is the IDEA Act says, you think about the journey, don't just redo the journey as it is today, reimagine and digitize. If the journey is that she searches for the unfair wages form, fills it out, does the transaction online, gets a confirmation, signs it online, completes the entire transaction and gets to her destination, all online. As you're looking at these different customer journeys, you really want to be able to select based on some criteria. It could be high volume, it could be high impact, it could be what's important to your agency, but you select a subset of these journeys and you start to go down the process of doing the digital transformation. So that's what the IDEA Act is talking about doing. Now, of course, we all know there'll be internal elements you have to deal with, like culture, infrastructure, existing content. There'll be external elements you have to deal with, like vendors or SaaS services that you're consuming. All of those have to be considered in this journey. So this transformation does not occur in a vacuum. And I want to give you an idea of what it'll take to make this digital transformation a reality. When we were talking about those customer journeys that the customer citizen Jane is going through, these are actually enabled by a bunch of things that you have today in your organization. You have your technical infrastructure. You have your organizational services, okay? Like your people, your talent, the change management processes, all of that. And as you start building these apps or doing the business services to serve up to citizen change, you're going to be able to identify some foundational things that you can do which are repeatable. They're modular, they're configurable, they can be swapped in and out of business systems and business services that citizen Jane is going to be consuming. So you can start identifying those. Personalization may be one of that. E-signature could be one of that, which means that as you're doing the e-signature a certain way today, you may augment that very quickly with, say, retinal scans and swap it in and out of the different things that Citizen Jane is consuming, the business services. Search may be another one, so on and so forth. And as you build these libraries, you will be able to make them really basically, you'll make this technical infrastructure less of a pain. You'll be able to make small changes in the technical infrastructure that have less of an impact on the shared services and the business services that you are delivering. It can be done faster in a more modular way. And that's what we want to get to. You still have to deal with your people, your data, your processes, your technologies. They're all important. It's just that you have to start creating these libraries to be fast in producing these end products for Citizen Jane. You're going to look at your talent in many different ways. You're going to create teams for different cross sections of things to be done. And you have to realize, as we're talking about the IDEA Act, this is what you're going to transform to achieve the digital transformation experience for Citizen Jane. But this journey never ends. This is an ongoing journey, and things that worked yesterday will not work today. For example, you may have metrics that you were monitoring your sites in production and producing reports, and that might have worked wonderfully yesterday. But today, you'll need real-time dashboards. You'll need to rethink the metrics you measure. So all of that transformation has to occur. And so I'm going to keep dialing in. That's what we're doing. And I'm going to now fill in or zoom in into the Section 508. What does this transformation of the IDEA Act mean for Section 508? So let's look at Section 508 as a shared service. The requirements are clear. You got a plan, you got a budget, you got to govern, right? That's not going to go away. You got to do that. So let's look at what we can think or rethink, reimagine these Section 508 things being. Tooling, whether it is a API that is built into your continuous integration, continuous deployment build, whether it is your unit testing that developers are doing using a browser extension or a command line tool, or integrated into their automated testing system like Cucumber, Karma, whatever, or if it is a monitoring in production, all of this tooling can be made available to your entire organization as a shared service. What that does is it just makes it modular. It makes it easier. It makes it like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Same thing with talent upskilling. You will need to upskill your talent for the IDEA Act across a variety of things. Section 508, because it's a customer experience impact, will need talent upskilling across the organization. It is a very wide impact really across the org. So that can be made available as a shared service as well. Reporting can be made available as a shared service. That means that whether you stand it up internally and do it yourself or just sign on to reporting as a service, it can be a shared service that is easy to disseminate across your organization. Change management and planning can be done. This is really important because what is required for Section 508? Let's address the elephant in the room. What is required? Yeah, change management planning is very important, but you will need money, you will need skills, and you will need resources. Most importantly, you will need political support who realizes all these things are needed to make this a reality. Right? And so all constraints have to be considered. There are other things you can get help on: change management, planning, prioritization, and budgeting, and continuous improvement. Make available as many things as you can as a shared service. Consider your constraints. It's the IDEA Act actually tells you where you have to get to. It lays out a map of where you need to go. How you get there is going to be substantially more difficult. And these are the things that we think you will need to consider for Section 508 requirement of the IDEA Act. By the way, one other thing that all of you probably know much better than me is that one size will not fit all for getting from current state to the future state. You don't have a lot of time to get there. But, it's not going to be just, everybody will have different constraints. What constraints can be addressed and what cannot be addressed will be different for each organization as well. So make sure you identify your constraints, remove the ones you can, make incremental progress. You have to, according to the IDEA Act and the reporting that it requires, you will have to show incremental progress. And then you will have to track the trends, the progress, and adjust as need be. So let's look at how would you manage change for Section 508. How are you going to stop the bleeding? That's a part of the planning. That's the requirement for the new stuff that you're going to be building. And, that doesn't go away. So how are you going to sustain it? How will you do this in an agile fashion? It's not going to be, you don't have you have to, speed is important here. It is, your requirements are getting faster and faster. Your deployment to production, your sprint releases are getting shorter and shorter, 2 weeks sprints, I don't know, even shorter, daily in some cases I hear. Security is requiring we do things faster as well. DQs had to learn to do things much faster because of that requirement ourselves, So compressed timelines are not going to go away. They're going to only increase the pressure. So prioritize, de-scope, deduplicate, do all of that, but figure out how to stop the bleeding in an agile way. We can help you plan for that. How do you budget? How much effort will it take? How many dollars will it take for the newer and existing stuff? How long will it take? You need to be able to produce this report and give it to Congress very soon. So you need to be, probably this effort should be underway already. And, once you figure out what you're going to address, you want to create a baseline. You want to do an inventory. You don't want to be in the tribe that we say, where the fuck are we? Where the fuck are we? That's the tribe that doesn't know where they are. We don't want to be there. So get a baseline. How do you measure and report in Section 508? What we are going to measure and report and how will we use the data to improve are both requirements of the IDEA Act. For Section 508, we're going to want to measure training, engagement, and completion, okay? I think there are a lot of courses in your learning management system that you're mandated to take annually. Stuff that is impacted by IDEA Act should probably require you re-look at that training. You look at the curriculums that are mandatory and the frequency at which they're completed and how you track completion. You want to make sure that people finish the course, not just started the course, because they learn a lot through it. And, you want to look at, are you stopping the bleeding really? Are defects being prevented from being introduced? Are they being contained? When are they being contained? How early are they being contained? The prevention rate, first pass rate, is a great thing to measure early in the life cycle, in the development environment. You may want to look at your incidents that are in production and problem management of those. This comes from the ITIL methodology that is pretty pervasive. But look at how you manage those incidents. And then you're going to look at the defects, you're going to classify them, you may do different things with them to improve many things. Better training, targeted training, something else, more automation, custom rules, all kinds of things can happen. The talent management and upskilling for Section 508 is really about different things. Because you have to recognize you're not going to turn your entire organization at a moment's notice to be 508 experts. It takes time to give them the knowledge they need in order to create compliant content. They can learn by doing, which is a great way to learn. I like that personally. It's a very effective way for developers to learn. Give them some help. Give them a navigator, a Sherpa, who's going to guide them through the process. Make them available to answer questions. Don't let them have to do a Google search and come up with 20 results that are wrong and implement the wrong thing. Give them help by giving them a peer who's going to sit next to them and do peer programming that is accessible, that is going to teach them how to do that. Get them some help to become more efficient. Learning how to do this is important. You can learn by learning. We talked about the learning management system. You can learn by doing. You can have instructor-led training, all kinds of things. But you also need to help them get more efficient. So on-demand accessibility help through a help desk where they can go through a Slack channel, through a support website and ask a quick question, a forum, and get a response from a pool of experts. Imagine how, it basically unblocks them from doing work. Get them help to do smart ticketing as they're getting reports, if they're getting reports that contain, like for the retrofitting effort, you may get a report that has thousands of issues. The thousands of accessibility issues that are reported are not equal to what somebody has to do to fix it. You may be able to take all your color contrast issues and make it into one ticket or 10 tickets. Thousands of issues reduced to 10 tickets. But a developer who's new to accessibility won't how to, or a Scrum Master won't know how to do this. A product owner will not know how to do this. Get them the help to understand how the normalization of these accessibility defects can be done. Or you can outsource it. You can outsource using a solution like Deque has, Amaze, do it as an overlay if you don't have the time, if you don't have the resources right now, but go back and fix it in the source. You can get help to fix things in the source code if you want. You can outsource things like PDF remediation, which, you may not have the skills to do. MS Office document remediation, things like that. You'll have to make those decisions. The shared service aspect of training is the learning online, on demand. Deque University is one such shared service that you can make available. It has online courses that can be imported into your system as a SCORM compliant package and maintained, updated, or you can subscribe to a SaaS offering of Deque University, which has comprehensive role-based courses to address every single role that is impacted by the IDEA Act Section 508 requirement. Tools. Somebody told me, boy, you guys have so many tools. Yes, we do. We have the right tool for the right role at the right time for the right person. So these tools can be very effectively made to available as a shared service. For example, there's a browser extension that comes with WorldSpace Attest. You can make that available so that every time a Chrome extension is installed or other browsers are installed, the accessibility tool gets installed by default. That's a great thing. You can script. You can do the whole user journey so Citizen Jane doesn't have to be shut out at any one point. You can integrate it into your continuous integration servers. You can do it for the web and you can do it for Android and iOS native mobile applications. These tools are available. Make them available as a shared service so you can make life easy for yourself. And make it easy to actually get all this data aggregated for the IDEA Act reporting, which takes us right to the shared service of monitoring and reporting. Whether you do this in-house or you do this as a reporting as a service, you want to be able to get a dashboard that gives you the trend, that lets you drill down to the specific website, specific application, specific page, specific defect. It breaks it down by what is a true barrier versus a nice to have. What is the impact in terms of the severity and the effort taken to fix it? So all kinds of data can be really gathered and reported on over time. And you will need to provide this report to the public. You will need to publish these reports under the IDEA Act on an annual basis to the public, details as well as the summary. If you have the WorldSpace suite of tools, all of that information can be pulled from a test, which is for automated testing, Assure, which is for doing the guided manual testing, Comply, which is for monitoring. All the data coming from these source systems can be put into an aggregation server, and the dashboard can report on the different metrics that you decide to report on. Again, I say that one size does not fit all, so use help to define those metrics. In summary, how can Deque help scale and sustain the Section 508 program that you need to have in place now because of the IDEA Act? I do say, sure, public-facing content, new content, existing content, that's a very large effort. I don't underestimate what it will take now that you have to report externally, very visibly. You're going to have to pay more attention to that if you're not already. But the internal efforts are going to dwarf that. So you need to get started seriously at a sustainable program. We can help with change management, all the different aspects of organizational change management that we talked about. We have an accessibility program office that has done this many times for many different entities of all different sizes and can come in and help you define these different things. What metrics to measure? What is the right kind of integration you will need? What, is the frequency with which you will need to do this, etc. What training will your people need? All of this can be defined. What people you will need to hire, all of that. You can baseline, again, baselining. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where to go. So do an inventory and use, probably because the baseline needs to be done fairly soon. And you may not have the time to get your internal tools in place and purchase and deploy. I would really encourage you to look at the subscription of the reporting as a service, which helps you get started right away. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to get trained in anything. Just get a report to get the baseline. It will help you prioritize. It'll help you estimate what it'll take to get your retrofitting effort done. This is mostly for the retrofitting, the December deadline. Then shift left for the new stuff that you're developing. Like I said, we started realizing that this is the way it's cheaper and faster to do things. And that's what we have been, that's been our mantra for many years. And Attest HTML and mobile were designed for shifting accessibility left. You can do the retrofitting. You still, after you figure out where you stand, with your existing stuff, you have to do the things to fix it because you need to show progress and continuous improvement. So, but most importantly, if there's anything I leave you with, the continuous testing and improvement is key to all of this and to help make the IDEA Act compliance really painless for your organization. The continuous testing process and looking at what is coming out of that process, the metrics, can help you figure out how you can increase automation, whether it is through custom rules, machine learning rules that you add in. It'll help you target what are your points and your talent, where do you need to target your training. It'll help you refine your metrics. So that is what I think the IDEA Act requirements are and how we can help. Hope we at Deque can be of assistance in getting you there. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Preety. So at this time, we're going to open it up for questions. So you can put those in the chat box or the question box. I have one real quick for you, Preety, here. Is how does this all differ or relate to the Section 508 refresh that recently came about?
Yeah, that's a great, very good question, Laura. I think it just puts it into sharp focus. The actual requirements are the same. They all go back to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. But I think it puts a sharper focus on additional requirements which are not in the refresh, very specifically. Like I was talking about the consistent appearance, right? That's a distinct requirement. So website modernization has 8 requirements. Accessible to people with disabilities, which maps to the Section 508, refresh as it is today. Consistent appearance, which is the Work Act 2.1, cognitive disabilities, incorporates a lot of that. No overlap, which is like what it is, just don't put stuff out there willy-nilly, and stuff that is not being used, take it down. Search that works, that is really, again, not a requirement under 508 refresh per se, but yeah, definitely. So we do look at search functions to make sure it's consistently giving the right results and the right flow, the right customer journey. Standard secure connection, your security people must be all over it. Continuously test and improve. I talked about that. That's not a part of the 508 refresh. Efficiency. I don't think Section 508 refresh very specifically talks to the customized experience, personalized experience that is efficient and accurate, but that is a requirement. And mobile friendly, again, that maps to Work Act 2.1. So in a nutshell, if you're complying with 508, you're in good shape. You may have to look at the additional things you have to do, which you will have to do, but yep, you'll be in good starting point.
Great, thanks. So how does this act relate to the requirements of digital content accessibility provided outside of the web, i.e. instructional/learning content in an LMS system?
It does apply. I mean, so if you remember the 3 different scoped areas, one is your new stuff, where you've got to stop the bleeding. And if the new stuff happens to have in it some training that you're developing internally or externally, those should be built conformant with the IDEA Act requirements. They should be accessible from the get-go, for example. For the retrofitting effort, you have a little bit more time till December to report and then to provide the roadmap of how you're going to address it. And if you're building a training that is customer-facing, external-facing, that is going to be applicable to that. And then the internal training that you're talking about will also have to be compliant. That's the 3rd scope that we talked about, which you may have a little bit more runway with.
Great. Another question for you here. Can you help answer if the IDEA Act is applicable to private websites?
This is very specifically for modernizing and making the customer experience delightful for the government. So, no, it doesn't apply to a private site like Deque.com, but, having read it, digested it, thought about it for a long time, I don't see how it can be helpful to anybody. But no, it does not apply.
Great. Does the IDEA Act apply to state websites, or is this federal only?
So far, it's federal only. I'm sure state governments will take into consideration what is applicable to them. Again, one size does not fit all. State entities are quite unique in what they have to deal with. But I'm sure this will, in some shape and form, be adopted by the different states over time.
Great. So how does an organization know if they are compliant with Section 508? And are banks required to comply?
I'll take the first question. How do you know? I think the best way, like I was saying earlier, is to get a baseline. You need to know where you stand. And that means like pointing to your base domain URL and just going through and spidering through, crawling through, and getting an idea of the extent, intensity, and nature of the Section 508 problems across your entire digital footprint. And that can be done as a service, reporting as a service, or talk to us of different ways that we can help you with that. And to banks, no, I don't think so.
Okay, so another follow-up question: how detailed does the report need to be for the one that's being presented to Congress in December?
I don't think we've got guidance on that, but it says details with details. Now, what those details mean is something that Deque's been working really hard to create a template for, so that we can give guidance to our customers and say, well, this is what we think is going to be sufficient. So when direction doesn't come forth, you have to create a template that you think is going to be acceptable, and that's what we're doing.
Great, thanks. So does this apply to Section 504 as well?
Yes, I don't see why not.
Okay. And then do we expect federal agencies that were not complying with the law, i.e. Section 508, will comply with the IDEA Act?
I think there is added incentive to do so. And I do think the visibility will make a difference, and basically, I think the emphasis on the customer journey is what is going to change things essentially. So everybody is realizing, the old way of doing things is not going to work. So I think it is going to get more scrutiny, and the fact that the CIO of the agency is going to be responsible for this, hopefully will get you more resources. So that's the hope. I do think there is added scrutiny, so it should help.
Great. And a follow-up question to that: what avenues can be followed if budget allotments do not allow for such modernization?
I think the report to Congress, the clearer you can make it, is intended to get you those dollars. So that's why it asks for current state, tell us where you are, tell us what it's going to take in terms of the dollars and effort. It also tells you to really identify a reasonable timeline. Now, all of these things are meant to get you those dollars. So how effectively you go up to your CIO and provide the right data is going to help you get the right dollars, I believe, for your Section 508 program.
Great, thanks. And a quick question about metrics. What things should people specifically maybe provide examples, be measuring for in relation to Section 508 and accessibility?
I think the one size doesn't fit all applies here, but some metrics that I talked about in an earlier slide really gets into is your property trending in the right direction? Do you have more critical defects? Are you preventing defects? What's the first pass rate? Again, these are just a few examples, and we can help you define those metrics and help you then produce those metrics.
Great. Another question here. How do I get executive level officials to care about Section 508? What data points could they bring to them to make them care about accessibility in 508?
That is such a great question. I wish I had a silver bullet for that, right? I wish I had a magic wand to make people realize how important it is to the customer journey and experience of every individual out there to address 508, Section 508 requirements. But I guess what I can tell you is help us help you get that baseline report in place. That will get some attention. It's formatted for consumption by executives, okay? So it'll get their attention. Secondly, we have had great success with something called Empathy Lab. Now, you can never really live a day in the life of somebody with a disability. You really cannot do that in a short time. There's just no way. But what you can do is give a little bit of the experience firsthand through this Empathy Lab, where people have to go through and see what it is like to be blind and consume information by a screen reader. So maybe holding something like that for your executives would be a good thing. And we can look into doing that. Please talk to us about ideas. We can collaborate on that.
Great. And then, are there any good free tools out there for PDF remediation that people in the audience could access?
Not that I know of, and that's why I really wanted to make this PDF remediation a non-issue for people by creating a service bureau, which is very cost-effective and scalable, and because I don't know of any free PDF accessibility tools, but I may be wrong. I just haven't looked or found any.
Okay, well, it looks like we've gone through all of our questions. And thank you, Preety, for a great presentation, and thanks to everybody in the audience for their great engagement. If you have any additional follow-up questions, we can answer those via email. Just another reminder, we're going to send this recording and slides out to everybody as a follow-up. And I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
And thank you, everybody, for attending. Bye-bye.